Historical fiction so delicious, written for you think you are there. That is by a person from an Amazon review. Gordon S. says, highly recommended, excellent book, beautifully written. Lionel knows his stuff and really knows how to write. This is just two of the reviews I'm reading out to you that are on Amazon highlighting this wonderful book, Midnight's Exiles. Hello, my name is Rod DeQuar, and I'm here with Lionel Lumb, a longtime Anglo-Indian Association of Canada member and former editor of our online magazine, The Mosaic. Lionel has recently published a novel called Midnight's Exiles, set in India during the Second World War and the turmoil of partition. Some of us fans who have read, and it would be more of you, hopefully more of you, to learn about what's been called a powerful and moving story, which brings to life a family torn by history, bound by love, and tested by the partition of India. Lionel's been a journalist, a TV producer, university professor, a book editor, and now an author. Lionel, let's start at the beginning. How did you get into the writing game?
Well, you could say it's all my mother's fault because what happened was she used to read a lot to me, and I became the kind of kid that spent a lot of time in the house. And when I was just a toddler, I used to drag around my little carpet, my durry, my Indian durry. On it, I would have my picture books, and I would that had been read to me, and that I would read again and again, and then I just kept on reading. And then I had an aunt, a grand aunt, as a matter of fact, who, instead of giving us cricket bats or hockey sticks from Louisiana or footballs for our birthday presents, she would give my brother and I books, five, six, seven books at a time. And I became an avid reader, still am. Nothing's changed. And slowly, from that kind of beginning, my love for words, my love for literature, my love for telling stories, for getting people intrigued by something that you spark their imagination and you take it somewhere. And this is what I felt instinctively or intuitively that I would like to do and was able to do. And it just happens that my very first attempt at a short story was I sent it to the Calcutta Statesman. I was 14 years old, and to my surprise and delight, they not only published it, they sent me 25 rupees. Now, figure that out. 25 rupees in 1950. Well, that meant I could go to a lot of movies and buy a kari kebab or four on the way home. So, writing became not only something that I enjoyed, wanted to do, but something that I could profit from. And as soon as I had left St. Xavier's College, I was lucky enough to bump into at the Grill Club in Calcutta, the famous club in Calcutta for Anglo-Indians. At the Grill Club in Calcutta, I went up to the bar one day to buy myself an orange juice because I was that young. And there was a guy there, a lonely looking guy there. And he said, "Oh," told the waiter, he said, "Oh, put it on my chit, my account, my chit," as we used to say. And I said, "Oh, thank you." And then he asked me who I was. I told him. He said, "I know that name." And I said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Oh, I'm Mervyn Harding." I said, "Oh my gosh, you're the editor who's been accepting my stories for the last 4 or 5 years." He said, "Yes." The next thing I knew, he said, "Would you like a job?" I mean, it was that easy. I can't believe how the gods were smiling that day. All God was smiling on me that day. And I got the job of my life. I have never regretted it. I've loved it. I've loved every moment of it. And well, I even taught journalism in the end because and writing because I felt that this was something that everybody should be tempted into doing and keep on doing.
Good, good, good. You were an assistant professor at Carleton University. How did
Associate
that come
professor,
about?
yeah.
How did that come about? Because
Well, what had happened was I had been a journalist for a long time, first with the Calcutta Statesman, then with Reuters and the BBC in London, and then we came to Canada in 1973, and I worked for all three networks at different times: the CBC, CTV, and Global, and helped start Global, as a matter of fact, one of the early producers on it. But the in back in 1987, I was sent by the CBC to Duke University for a fellowship, and the student dealing with students really appealed to me. And when I came back, again, I got another gift. Um, Somebody at Ottawa University said, "How would you like to teach a course on communications and journalism, things like media stuff?" Right up my alley. So I said, sure. So I taught, and the second bug, the first bug was to just get into print. The second bug was to be bitten by was TV, and the third was to teach. And I just absolutely love teaching, and I taught there for a total of about 15 years. Yeah, at Carleton. I was an
Great,
associate
beautiful,
professor. Yeah.
good. I understand you started the book several years ago. I'm talking about Midnight's
Oh.
Exile, and you tucked it away. What prompted you to pull it out and continue writing again?
Well, it was far longer, to be honest, than several years ago. It was back in 1986 I began it, and it went really well. And I got to what I would say was about 300 pages and maybe the halfway mark or so. And I was very happy with what I did, but somehow or the other, when I got to that point, I just simply ran out of inspiration. It was a dead end. It was kind of sad, but I had to live with it. And I was also very, very busy with my job as executive producer at the CBC in Ottawa, and later with News World as well, CBC News World, now CBC Network News. And I just put it aside. And then one day, a very good friend of mine, another CBC guy called Andy Little, we were having lunch, and he said, "What else do you like to do, and why? What have you missed out on in life?" And I said, "Well, I have this novel." I said, "It's not bad, but I can't carry on with it." He said, "Why don't we start working on it?" So, well, okay. So he and another friend, Nick Haramis, another CBC guy. We used to meet once a week. We called ourselves, you'll pardon the language, the Ottawa Old Farts Writers Association. And and that's a fairly accurate description of us. And each of us had to write something for each week. And each week I wrote another chapter or part of a chapter of my novel. And they would write short stories, whatever. And we would exchange our views and so on. So it's called workshopping in the trade, if you like. An author works with other people, and he kind of workshops his work as he goes along. And we got through to it, and I actually finished it in 2011. It took a long time, but I did finish it in 2011. I actually wrote the words, typed in the words, "the end" in 2011, and I thought, oh, good, now I can rush it to print. Well, that didn't happen, and the thing lingered again. And then a good friend of ours, a wonderful person from the Anglo-Indian Association of Canada called Kathleen MacLeod, we were having one of our meetings for the Mosaic, the online magazine that we helped put together. Kathleen, Rosalita, Lawrence, yourself, and Joe Gonzalez. And Kathleen said to me, she said, I love that short story of yours that Harry McClure published in Anglers in the Wind. I said, really? I said, which one was that? And I didn't actually remember it. She said, oh, it was in a special edition that Harry produced. I said, oh, that's not a short story. That's an excerpt from the novel. So she brought it to the meeting. I read it, and I said, well, that's really not half bad. And so I went back into it, and then lo and behold, a couple of years later, I finally finished, and I got a nice nudge along the way. I found a producer, uh, Kathy McKenzie from Nova Scotia, and she took it on as to publish it, and here we are. We have a book now, and a heavyweight, isn't it? It's what another
So
friend of
thanks.
mine called a rib crusher. He picture somebody lying in bed and this heavy book resting on their chest. And I thought, rib crusher. Well, okay, I'll take it. I'll take anything as long as people read it and like it.
So we have to thank Kathy McLeod for prompting you to continue the book and get to the end. So I hope you're giving her 10% of the proceeds.
No, but I've showered blessings on her, showered them.
Good. Okay, the song, you have a song there, Easy Pickings. Did you write
Oh
the
yeah.
song?
Well, this is interesting, and maybe a lot of writers don't know this, so it might be useful information for other people. But what happened was this. I've always been a music buff and music buff of the great ballads and the great balladeers. You know,
Mhm.
favorite singers, Frank Sinatra, Nat King Cole, Ella Fitzgerald, people, Sarah Vaughan, people like that. So the book is the much of the book starts off or much of it is in the Second World War. So I was very, very familiar with the music of the Second World War because we had one of those wind up gramophones with the steel needles and the speaker and HMV, I guess it was. That's an ad for HMV. And we used to play music, a lot of music, and I just love that stuff. So in the original version of the novel, as I had written it over the decades, not years, um, I had inserted a lot of songs that meant something to the story. Now, what I mean by that is that I used the songs to advance the narrative storyline of the story. So these were very appropriate songs like "Don't Fence Me In" and
Mhm.
all kinds of songs that would mean something. And I put them, or, "Please Don't Talk About Me When I'm Gone," songs like that. And I put them in, and I used their words and some of their words here and some of their words there, just to build them in, interlace them with the narrative. And they worked very well. And then Kathy McKenzie, the publisher, said, "We have to do something about the songs." And I said, "What do you mean?" She said, "Well, you're never going to get permission for any song that was written after 1930 because it's all banned by copyright. And to get
Right.
permission, you got to go to each individual owner of the right, the owner of the rights of each
Mhm.
individual song and get their permission, maybe even pay them hefty sums. You'll never achieve this." So I said, well, to hell with it. I'll write my own major song. So that's what I did. And one day I was sitting at the computer and I got to the point in the story where I had created a character who cared. And oh, I'd mentioned during that, I'd mentioned in a couple of chapters how it was that young Anglo-Indian women in particular were being courted by, romanced by visiting American GIs
Right.
and British Tommies, and then kind of dropped. And it wasn't a pleasant scene for young Anglo-Indian boys, men in those days in the wartime, because they were kind of shut out of the dating game. And and then this song sprang into my mind, and I got this character in the book, Laura Pringle. I got her to sing a song called Easy Pickings. Actually, the song should have been called Never Easy Pickings, but that doesn't matter. Easy Pickings. And I just made it up and it suited the storyline. And you see, once again, what
Good.
you do is you take a song, you weave it into the narrative, and I made three different verses advance the story of how Laura Pringle, the singer, is not only advising young Anglo-Indian women to be careful in their romantic dalliances, if you like, with the soldier boys, but also telling the soldier boys to be nice and gentlemen. Didn't use the word honorable, but that was the implication. So
Now,
I'm very proud about that song, because I think it worked well.
good.
Sorry,
Is
took a
there a
long answer.
melody?
Sorry.
Is there a melody to it? Or no?
I'll sing it for you, but you'll have to you'll have to polish the music. I can't sing, by the way. My father, who was
Uh,
had perfect pitch, sang in choirs all his
well,
life.
if you've got a melody to it, we won't sing it today. But what we'll do is we'll send it to David Foster and see what he can do with it. Now you know who he is.
No, no, Rod, you would have to dress it up.
That's no. So you are not only are you an author, you are a poet also.
Um, I wouldn't go quite that far, but one of my friends says there is a lyrical quality to my writing, which he
Oh, there is.
admired in the book. So I'll take that as a compliment.
So some of the romance gets very sensual in the book. I
Hmm.
can see a bit of Harold Robbins in your writings.
I
Very
wish you hadn't said
delicately
Harry
written.
Robbins. I'm trying to think of the like. Oh, there's a British writer called H.E. Bates, um, who wrote a novel called Love for Lydia, and I recommend that most highly to all lovers of literature,
Mhm.
young lovers in particular. And if I said that. I reject the Harry Robbins, but I'd say if there's a smidgen of H.E. Bates, whom I considered a wonderful writer,
Oh yeah.
then okay. Yeah, no, actually, what I was trying to do, I'll tell you what I was trying to do there. First
Hmm.
of all, I wanted to balance off some tender romances
Hmm.
with one or two, one in particular, torrid romance. And and it was a deliberate attempt to again to get readers into the story to really understand what life was like in those days, the wartime years and even partition. The pace of romances was tremendous. I mean, you
Hmm.
know, people would go to dances and the next day they were together and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I was just a kid. I was 10, 12 years old. And I'd be lying there on the floor in the veranda beneath the table lamp reading a book, and somebody would
Yeah.
be talking about the latest scandal. And you pick these things up, and then a writer makes use of everything. By the way, Rod, you don't know, but you'll figure in something one of these days.
Yeah. Now you write about the Yankees, Americans, the British Army. You also talk about the British Indian Army. Who are the British
Yes,
Indian Army?
yes. Well, the British Indian, okay, so in India during the Raj, and by the way, the term Raj only came to be used after the British rule in India had ended. It
Right.
was not called Raj until later. But up until 1947, from the time the British really took over India, I mean, not just the East India Company days, but past the East India Company days, into the British rule, which began in the latter mid 1800s with Queen Victoria, the Empress of India. Remember, India was called the jewel in the crown for a good reason. It was very profitable to the British. So there were always they developed two armies. They had the British Army in India, that is to say, British regiments coming out to India, being posted in India for various periods of time, 2 or 3, I don't know how many years at a time. And but in India, they developed the British Indian Army to help out, and they had them run mostly obviously in those days by British commanders, British colonels, British generals, etc.
Mhm.
But they would have 3 regiments together. After the mutiny, they separated they said, we'll never have a Muslim regiment, a Hindu regiment, and a Sikh regiment, but we'll combine all 3 religions into 1 regiment each. So you have, for instance, the Royal Deccan Horse, they were to have Sikh soldiers, Muslim soldiers, Hindu soldiers, and that was a pattern that was repeated in regiment
Mhm.
after regiment. Some of these
And
regiments.
there were no Anglo-Indians in that army?
Oh yes, of course. Anglo-Indians did join. Anglo-Indians, many Anglo-Indians served in the war. And
Mhm, mhm,
one of the reasons I wrote this as a novel was because lots of Anglo-Indians, especially after independence, lots of Anglo-Indians have written their memoirs, and a lot of them served in the war. People like Desmond Hales, I think, is the name that springs
mhm,
many names. There was actually a Dunn who fought in the '65 war, General Dunn, I think, and so on and so forth. And my
mhm.
own uncle Tony was a brigadier general in the Royal Deccan Horse, and
Talking about,
the saddest thing is that after the war, Uncle Tony's regiment, he chose to go to Pakistan because at that time all of his family was living in Lahore. So he went to Pakistan, and one of his buddies was from a different regiment, but they had fought together in Burma, and now they were fighting against each other across the border after the Kashmir
no,
troubles
talking
began. It
about,
was a very sad and
talking,
moving
oh,
thing.
yeah, talking about Uncle Tony. Was he the person who wrote the prayer to the mother for the fallen soldier?
No, I don't think so. I don't believe
No?
so.
Okay.
I don't know who did that.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't
Uh,
know the author.
okay. Many people say I should write a book. I'm saying it myself. I should write a book about my life, but it's not easy. Just to write a letter, one has to focus, concentrate. I can't imagine what it takes to write a book. One has to be framed, the right frame of mind, focused, inspired. How do you do it? How do you do it?
Yeah, well, you just simply count your blessings when the muse, as they say, hits you or comes on over you. The best example I can offer you is that out of sheer necessity, when I realized I had to take 7 popular ballads of the 30s and 40s and 50s out of my novel and
Mhm.
replace them with a single song that I composed. Uh, I just went into that praying that, okay, let me get the right inspiration to make up a meaningful song, a song that is uh, advances this. You always have to advance the storyline, okay, the narrative. So I had to make up a song that not only could stand by itself, you could sing it as a song anywhere, but also advance the story. So that actually is the essence of every single part of writing a novel or even writing a memoir, is you must find little links, okay? You have to keep on going. So I spent a lot of time, uh, 4 decades. Uh,
Yeah.
it's beyond funny, actually. Um,
Mhm.
Looking for and adding links from one chapter to another. So I would try to end one chapter in such a way that I could lead into the next chapter. Hemingway said one of his lines was, "Never go to bed until you know what your first sentence is going to be the next day," something like that. And
Really?
that's what I would do. I would finish writing of an evening or an afternoon, whatever, and I would just make a little note. Okay, the next section goes going to begin with just the idea, not the words, but the idea.
Mhm.
And then it might take you an hour or two to get into the words, but there
Wow.
you go. So bit
Which
by bit, what you
chapters?
do. The other thing is
Mm,
you have to, if you're writing a novel in particular, you have to consider how do you make your characters interesting? How do you bring your characters alive? Now, if somebody comes up to me and says, I love your characters, they, I could see them. I could hear them talk. I could visualize them. You know what? I'd be over the moon. I'd be an Artemis right now, up there. Okay?
sure.
If somebody came and said something like that to me, I would say, "Oh my God, bless you, thank you. I'm in the moon, on the moon. I'm not just circling the moon. I'm on the moon." So that's how
Well,
important that is to connect with a reader like that. I don't know if I
I
do,
can
but
yeah,
that's what I'm hoping for.
I can tell you I fell in love with Laura.
I'm
Beautifully
so
written.
your taste is excellent. Your taste is excellent. Of course, you would have to pick someone who is slightly on the naughty side instead of Jillian, who is a sweetheart, right?
Yeah.
I've got one more interesting story. I'd like to say
Mhm.
something else. A lot of people have said, how much of somebody asked me, how much of your grandfather, my grandfather, is in Harry? Well, not really. I mean, my grandfather he did drink, like most Anglo-Indian grandfathers were doing on a veranda somewhere in railway colonies and Calcutta and
Mhm.
upcountry, as we used to say. And, but he was charming as heck. Nothing at all like Harry. Harry obviously had a bit of a chance. My dad used to say, call his description of a guy like Harry would be, he's a chancer. Now that a chancer in the way my dad would use that word, which is I think it's a lovely word, is a guy who is always on the edge. He's maybe at heart a decent guy, but something can push
Mhm.
him into the wrong zone if
Mhm.
if he'd had maybe too much to drink or if he was with the wrong kind of guys. So
Really.
that's one character. Another
Mm.
character I wanted to talk about was um, the British RAF pilot Alan Allen
Alan. Mhm.
Alan and uh, he's one of the few people based on a real person, but he wasn't British. He was, in fact, another uncle of mine. I had five uncles in the war. There was Uncle
Oh.
Tony, who was a brigade commander. There was Uncle Roy, in the quartermaster service. So was Uncle Tom, and Uncle Colin was in kind of the Navy, kind of reserve sort of thing. And then there was on my mother's side, there was this uncle called Ansel. We used to call him Slim, Ansel Stout. And Ansel Stout was a an airman with the RAF. He joined the RAF in India. Good looking as hell. He's good looking as hell, Flynn. And
Mm.
he got shot down over Burma right towards the end of the Burma campaign. Almost
Really.
the week before the Japanese surrendered in Burma, Uncle Slim got shot down. It broke
Mm.
up my grandmother. It broke up my mother, and who is a
Oh.
sister, and it affected all of us terribly.
Mhm.
But you see, I couldn't work him into the story. I didn't want to work him into the story. I already had four brothers in the story. I thought, well, let's change it. So I changed it to him. But that's one of the few real characters few characters based on a real person. Of course, there are the other real people like references to Mountbatten and
Mhm.
references,
Mhm.
et cetera, to
Now,
historical figures.
which chapters in the book did you enjoy writing and why?
Uh, well, definitely the chapter with your favorite character, Laura Pringle. I mean, I
Yeah.
think that gave me the greatest joy because that was totally imagined, absolutely imagined from start to finish, the whole scene. Except it was based on a true incident. There was,
Hmm.
there was a guy called Brian Hartnett and his
Oh yeah,
wife
I know him.
Rita. Hmm?
I
You
know
know the
Brian
name
Hartnett.
from Calcutta. Yeah, you know the
Yeah.
name.
Yeah.
Neville and Brian were two brothers in Calcutta. Yeah.
Mm,
And what was and I heard this story from somebody, and you just like like a squirrel. Okay, I put things in places, and suddenly they pop out, and like Laura popped out from nowhere and became a major character. I didn't invite her in; she just popped in. So I found her. I dug her out of a tree or something like that,
mhm,
and the squirrel in me found her. And but this little nugget was there. Somebody told me that Brian Hartnett and his wife Rita had won a jive competition at the skating club in Calcutta during the war. Now, I don't even know if that story is completely true, but I had lots of Anglo-Indians, older Anglo-Indians, in
mhm,
Calcutta. And I didn't get to Calcutta until 1949. I was only a kid, 12 years old at
mhm,
the time. And so I'd missed that whole scene. But anyway, that's what somebody told me. And so when I had this soldier, Ian, I wanted to show an Anglo-Indian soldier amongst other soldiers from different countries. And the scene in Calcutta was so cosmopolitan at the time because, full of
yeah.
whack guys from India, American
Mhm.
nurses, Anglo-Indian,
Which,
et cetera, et cetera. So I thought, okay, let's just get them all to this, and I'll do that. So putting that scene together, and not being a musician like yourself, Rod, I had to imagine what would a great singer, a great torch singer, and I guess if I had anybody in mind, it was probably somebody like Shirley Bassey was on the
mhm,
stage, not Laura, and somebody like Shirley Bassey, the English singer, somebody who is a torch singer who can actually move you to tears, get you to jump out of your seat, just
mhm,
wallow you to bits. So
mhm,
that was enjoyable. And another scene which I loved was, for totally different reasons, was the scene in which Elizabeth Farquhar Dunn comes back to Lahore and that
yeah.
whole business of the tamasha, to use the good Indian word, the tamasha of her arrival is like like the Maharani of somewhere is arriving and everybody's kind of, getting into place. And
Puja.
the line I like best in that is when I said she stands at the top of the railway stair, the carriage stairs, the railway carriage stairs. And when I wrote this line, I said, oh, I think this one will last. It said it's something like he stood at the top of the stairs wearing a slightly distasteful look, like a general for whom the welcoming band had mangled a favorite march. I thought,
I remember that one.
okay, I like that line. I
Nice
hope the
lines.
publisher will keep it in.
There are some beautiful sentences. When you read your book, I have to read the lines over again to actually grasp what you're saying. It's beautiful. It's really good. I'm
You
enjoying
you you could become my favorite piano player ever.
it.
Goodbye,
Now,
Teddy Wilson.
uh, it brought back memories reading about Coleman's mustard and Keen's. You never said Keen's mustard, and you mentioned Golden Eagle, and you never mentioned Sun Lager. These are the beers at the
Yeah, they
time.
came later, Rod.
Did they?
They came
Oh,
later.
did they really? Okay.
They
Now,
were not there until the 50s and 60s.
is that right?
Believe me,
Now,
I went to great pains
did
to
you?
to try to remember. I tell you what I didn't put in. I didn't put in Marmite. I put in treacle. I
Yeah.
got golden syrup and treacle in, which is a great thing that
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
we loved as kids.
And
Uh,
you mentioned Jardine Matheson. Did you mean Jardine Henderson?
uh,
Company that I know in Calcutta was
yeah,
Jardine
actually, Jardine,
Henderson.
okay, tell them to, yeah, okay. I think I was just playing around with that on purpose because
Yeah.
Jardine Henderson was the firm in Calcutta. I believe the mother firm is in Hong Kong and it's called Jardine Matheson. But if somebody pointed that out, I have since had discovered a couple of errors, but I'm not going to share those with you. Not now.
No, no, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Uh, no, the Hindi and the Urdu words you use, quite a lot of it. I'm going to the glossary. I don't even know what it's about. And did you are commendable the way you use them. Did you take Hindi and Urdu classes
Yeah,
in school?
yeah. I mean, yes, but only as a schoolboy. What
That's
happened
cool.
was in St. Anthony's High School in Lahore, where I spent my early years. Uh, I got to about the fifth standard, as we used to say, there in Lahore, I moved to Calcutta. So I learned Urdu there, and then when I got to Calcutta, I had to learn Hindi because the Belgian Jesuits who were running St.
Yeah.
Xavier's at the time, they wisely insisted on learning Hindi
Mhm.
as a second language because it's the the lingua franca of well, India has two lingua francas, and one is English and the other is Hindi. And so
Right.
it was a smart thing to do to learn a bit. I could write it at one time. I could even read it at
So,
one time.
good.
But the other thing is, I worked on a couple of books for Blair Williams, the Anglo-Indian books that he published under the CTR banner.
Mm.
And a lot of people were using Indian words in their memoirs and their short
Were
stories,
they?
etc.
Okay.
And so you could say that I prepared a glossary. So I guess I put together more words. I put more words into my own vocabulary than I had originally
Mm.
if you go back 10, 15 years, I added. The other thing is I've been back to India several times, and
Mhm.
in no time at all, my Hindi, not Hindi, it's really bizarre Hindustani, it's just bizarre stuff.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm.
like pidgin English, they call
Yeah.
it pidgin English. And in about 1 week, I had absolutely no problem. One trip of mine, I was even for CPAC television, I was interviewing people who were speaking in Hindi and I was translating the Hindi into English as we were doing the interview. And I could do that at that time because I had been in India on sabbatical for several months. And believe me, in 6 months, a lot of it came back. Yeah. My grammar did not improve, but
Yeah. Yeah.
my
Now,
vocabulary.
a very interesting part in the book is the kite flying that
Oh,
went
yes.
on.
Yeah.
Did you fall off roofs or did you make manja of the glass manja?
It's just as well we didn't fall off a roof. Actually, to tell you the truth, the real kite flyer in the family was my brother Norton. Now, Norton was
Was
three
it?
years older than I was, and he was the
Mhm.
real kite flyer. And the I was his gopher. I was the guy rolling up you roll up the
Oh,
reel of the
well,
manja
that's right.
as
Yeah.
he's pulling in and so on and so forth, or letting it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was his gopher, but he was the kite flyer. In fact, if to tell the truth, that whole incident with the tukul, by the way, is actually real. That actually happened. That's one of the
It
few
did.
things I can say which was not imagined. But it wasn't me. I'll confess up front that was my brother actually who
Mm.
brought that tukul down and his hands were bleeding, etc. by the end of the
Beaut-
I don't want to
Beautifully
give too
written.
much of the story away, but anyway, it was what's pleased me about that scene is that several people, several readers who've never been to India never flown a kite in their lives, have all said to me that that's their favorite scene. And I thought, wow, okay, I like that. I wrote it for Anglo-Indians, but hey, come on.
You know, there's a kite club in Scarborough over here, and
I
there
did not know that. Yeah.
a lot of Anglo-Indians flying kites on the weekend
Do they
in the
have
summer.
tangles?
Hmm? Sorry?
Do they have kite fights
Yeah, 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 yeah,
with
yeah. They
manja?
do.
They were
With
sharp in
manja.
manja. Oh,
That's right.
I'll have to go and see if I can still
Yeah.
not only fly a kite, but maybe win a tangle.
Good to watch, yeah. Uh, my last question is, were you intending to target the younger Anglo-Indians or the community in general or the world in general with your book?
Yeah. I think the short answer to that very good question is why did I write this book, basically, is what you're asking, and who and for whom. Okay, great question. Um, I wrote it primarily for myself. It was a story that I had to get out. I felt I had to leave something of what I knew about India, what I felt and still feel for India. I have written before, you can take an Anglo-Indian out of India, but you cannot take India out of an Anglo-Indian. And
Right.
that's honestly how I felt. I felt that I had to try my darndest to capture India as it was for my family and similar families, the railway families, the business families, the Anglo-Indians who, the nurses, the teachers, people like that, that did so much for India, that was so valuable
Mhm.
to India, that helped to cement the Raj, to keep it going, right?
Yep.
So I wanted to write that in a kind of a last in a way that might last, that people may in 10 years pick up an odd copy of the book lying in some dump heap somewhere and say, oh, is that how it was? Oh, that's great. And then that was one point. The the second point was the for the younger generation. And I'll come to that last actually. The second point was for people in England, Canada, Australia, for whom we Anglo-Indians, somebody wiser than me said, we are an invisible minority. That is to say, we look like South Asians, we disappear into that group, but yet I've always had our own culture, our own, our own language, even our own patois, so to speak. And our own way of looking at the world and our belief in our Christian belief and things like that, that made us different and in some ways special. And I wanted to make sure that people in general knew that we might be invisible in some ways, but we are who we are. We are Anglo-Indians. We do have a separate culture. We do have I should say a distinctive culture. And we enjoy it. Most of us really enjoy it. There are some who deny it. Oh, to heck with them. But those who like it and embrace it, enjoy it. And then you come to the third point, the third, the next generation and the next generation. Now, nothing pleases a writer more than for somebody to write to them and say, and pick up on the points that that he himself has or herself has really liked in something they've written, whether it's an article, a short story, or a novel. I have a niece who wrote to me a couple of nights ago, and everything she said was, to use a billiard phrase, spot on. She
Mhm.
had everything right. And then she gave me the best news I could have heard.
Hmm.
Her daughter, who's my grandniece, is now reading the book. Well, can you
Okay.
imagine? Okay, uh, mission accomplished.
Well, Lionel, I have to congratulate you. The book is beautifully written. You definitely have an immense talent for writing, and keep it up. Carry on writing. We enjoy it. I'm speaking not only for Anglo-Indians, I'm speaking for people that are not Anglo-Indians who are buying the book, who know nothing about India. So this book is not only for people from India, it's for the world. And I have to, again, congratulate you for the way it has been written. It's beautifully written. And the people that are enjoying it are telling us about it. I have some more accolades from Amazon, where the person is saying, and the person named Anne Wood from England, she says, storytelling, an excellent read, an excellent read. Another person, Steve George, says, an excellent read, the way the very last long, sorry. An excellent read, the way lasts long in my will last long in my memory. The book will last long in his memory.
Well, that again, that's fantastic. Thank you
Yep,
for your generous comments, and thank you for doing this, and thank you to Sheldon Fernandez for having
yep.
the patience to sit through this and record it for us. And
I just,
well, I'm very happy to have done it. Yeah.
yep. I was just want to announce that this book is available on Amazon for $28. But if you buy it from the Anglo-Indian Association, from myself or Rosalita or Joe or Kathleen, they're available for you for $25. Okay. Highly recommend this book. Don't miss this opportunity. Buy it. Thank you very much for listening. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lionel.